back to the Menlo Circus Club. My name is Mike Adams. I'm the executive chef here. And this is, I think, the 5th episode of our Cooking Essentials class. And today is all about fish. Not going to really provide you with any recipes because we're going to focus more on technique of cooking different types of fish. I think that a lot of people struggle with it. And I just want to dispel some of the rumors about how to cook fish. Quick shout out to Dirk, who's back behind the camera today. Happy about that. And to Robin for all the crazy hours she puts in editing all this stuff and trying to make us look good. So this week we're going to focus on halibut and tuna. Next week, we're going to focus on salmon, because I know there's a lot of salmon eaters out there. And as far as another fish to focus on, I want you to choose. So shoot me an email, michela@menlocircusclub.com, and let me know what you want to see. I'd love to hear from you. So, why tuna and why halibut on the same day? A lot of the preparations for this are going to be really similar. Whereas for salmon, it might be a little bit different. They're both incredibly lean fish. There's not a lot of fat content in there, which makes them really, really good for pan roasting or for poaching. And really, those are the two techniques I want to focus on. We're going to talk about all 3 different techniques of cooking fish, but really, I want to focus on the pan roasting and the poaching. Relatives to this fish. Tuna is going to be similar to cooking yellowtail. It's going to be similar to cooking hamachi. It's going to be similar to cooking swordfish. The only difference is with the swordfish, obviously you want to cook it medium well, where tuna you really want it preferably rare to mid-rare. Halibut, it's kind of in the sea bass family. It's in the sea bass family as far as the way you cook it, not technically by genus or species. So there's sea bass, there's flounder, dorade, skate wing. They're all going to get cooked about the same. Salmon will be a little bit different. First thing I want to discuss is marinades. I don't like to put a lot of marinades on my fish. Fish is very delicate flavor most of the time. I don't want to overwhelm that. If I marinate something, I'm going to brush it on after I'm finished cooking just to add a little bit more flavor. One thing I always marinate my proteins in, though, is going to be extra virgin olive oil. Whether it's meat, whether it's chicken, pork, fish, they're always going to get a coating of extra virgin olive oil, and they're always going to sit in the refrigerator after that for a minimum of 4 hours until I use them. Why? Extra virgin olive oil is the only olive oil in the world that has a water-soluble molecule and a fat-soluble molecule. No other oil does that. If you use pure olive oil, you can use that in place of extra virgin, but it's going to need a longer marination time. So what happens is, as that oil penetrates the surface of the mussel, because essentially this is a mussel, the water-soluble molecule is going to bind with a water-soluble molecule in the fish, or the meat, or the chicken, and it's going to hold on to a fat molecule, which means you're going to get moisture proteins. I love that kind of crazy stuff. So, marinate extra virgin olive oil, 2 to 6 hours minimum. If you have to use a pure olive oil, 8 to 12 hours. You can marinate it and let it sit in your refrigerator for 2 days, just until you're ready to use it. So we're going to talk about 3 different techniques, 3 different types of heat when it comes to cooking proteins, or when it comes to cooking fish. First one is going to be dry heat. The second one is going to be a moist heat, and the third one is going to be a wet heat. Let's talk about dry heat really quick. We're not going to cover that much today, but dry heat is essentially high temp grilling. You have 800 to 1200 degrees hitting this protein, cooking it from the outside. I'm not a big fan of grilling fish, honestly. I don't think it's good for the fish. I think the temperature is too high. I think it dries out the outside of the fish. There are a few exceptions. Swordfish, when cut thin. Salmon, when cut thin. Tuna, because it's so quick and so fast on the grill, it's going to come it's only going to be on there for 2 or 3 minutes maximum, so you're not going to get that dryness on the outside. And then also whole fish, dorade, bronzino, stuff that has that protective skin on the outside, that is going to protect it from the dry heat, and you're going to get a crispy skin out of that. So we'll go over a little bit of grilling next week when we talk about salmon, because I know everybody loves salmon, and salmon has a nice, really high fat content, so it's actually a lot easier to grill. So I wanted to start today really with wet heat, and that is going to be poaching. It's one of my absolute favorite ways to cook fish. The end result is just buttery, delicious, fantastic, moist, as long as you do it right. There are 2 different types of poaching. You can poach in a bouillon, which is basically wine and water and aromatic vegetables and lemon, or you can poach in olive oil, or any type of oil, essentially. The technique for poaching in bouillon versus oil is exactly the same. So oil is much cooler, so we're going to focus on the oil today. And the first step when you're poaching in oil, this is the only difference in technique, is you want to take your protein and you're going to season it. And remember, season proteins aggressively. Just salt, pepper. You can put ground fennel seed in there, ground coriander, whatever you want to use. Season it about 20 minutes before you want to use it. And what that's going to do is it's going to penetrate. You're going to get that salt flavor into that fish. Otherwise, you put it in the oil, some of the salt comes off. If you're using a bouillon, instead of doing this, season your bouillon. Make sure it's got the right amount of salt in it, because then it'll penetrate that way. So we've seasoned our fish. We're gonna let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes. And then what I have here, I have about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of, this is a 50% extra virgin olive oil, pure olive oil blend. I've added some garlic, some sliced shallot, some thyme. You can add bay leaf, you can add chili flake. If you want something spicy, you can add jalapeno. Whatever direction you want to go, just flavor that oil, flavor that oil, flavor that oil. And I'm going to put it on the stove, and I'm going to slowly bring it up to temperature. And the temperature range we're looking for is between 148 degrees and 162 degrees. Anything in that realm is going to work. The biggest thing with the oil is that you want to have enough that the fish can swim in it. And what I mean by that is you don't want the fish cramped together, touching each other. It's got to be able to move around freely. Poaching does take a long time if you do it right, but really the end result is absolutely fantastic. We served poached salmon for Mother's Day that was absolutely beautiful. The salmon itself took about 15 to 20 minutes to cook, and we did that in a bouillon. You can do this essentially with any type of fish. You can do it with swordfish, delicious. You can do it with salmon, delicious. Whatever you want to do with it. So we brought our oil up to temp, and right now my oil, it's around 160 degrees, a little bit hotter than I like. I like to shoot lower 150s. But I'm going to take that piece of fish, I'm just going to lay it in there. And make sure you've got some of those whole herbs on the bottom, because that's going to protect it from the bottom of the pan. And then give it a quick stir. And I'm just going to put it over a low heat. I'm going to check that heat every 4 to 5 minutes. Just to make sure it doesn't get too hot. And what you can do is you can turn it off, you can turn it back on. Just maintain that range of 148 to 165. Let's say you don't have a thermometer at home. I get it. I don't have a thermometer at home. Why do I need a thermometer at home? You never saw me do this. One way to know if your oil is hot enough: take your finger, make sure it's clean, put it in the oil. If you can hold it in there for no more than 5 seconds, your oil is at the perfect temp. Don't ask me, I learned it years ago, and until recently, that was the technique I always used.
He's a licensed professional, do not try that at home.
my hands aren't that sensitive. So we're just gonna let this go. We're gonna let it cook. One other way to know that your oil is almost there is you're going to see little bubbles start to come off the garlic, very, very, very small. If it's bubbling rapidly, let it cool down, pull it off, and just let it sit until it comes down to a cooler temp. A lot of oil, right? Wasteful, right? No. Because we can use this oil to poach fish 2 or 3 more times before the oil just becomes not that great flavor-wise. The other thing I like to do, take this oil, chill it down, make a vinaigrette with it, and serve that on top of your fish. So it's really good. So this is gonna take some time. So we're actually gonna move on while this cooks. If you look, it's starting to cook around the outside. We're gonna move on. I'm gonna put this over on kind of a low heat while we focus on other techniques. And sometimes just the pilot light is enough to maintain that heat. So, the next, yeah, we're about 152, we're good. The next thing I want to focus on is what I call moist heat. And that's going to be searing and sauteing. Moist heat, hot pan, doesn't make sense. Well, if you think about it, if this is your pan and your fish is sitting on your hot pan, as that fish cooks, yeah, the pan's going to be 600-700 degrees, but there's going to be water evaporating into the pan. It's going to be throwing a little bit of water off, so it's not a completely dry heat like, let's say, direct fire or grill. So we'll start with tuna, then we'll move on to halibut. So, very simple. We're going to season both of these. I don't like black pepper on my halibut. I got some on there anyways, but I kind of think it can be a little overwhelming. Black pepper on the tuna for sure. One other thing to think about when you're cooking fish, and this is something I try to teach cooks. This is a very tactile cooking, meaning the more you cook fish, the more you should learn how it feels. As a professional chef, line cooks, we don't actually use thermometers to check the temperature of fish. We do it all by touch. And really, I want you, the members, to start focusing on that, because you can get to the point where you don't have to pull out a thermometer. You feel a piece of fish and you know it's done. And that's just, it's a great point to be at as far as cooking. So let's talk about searing. Searing versus pan roasting. Searing is good for tuna, not so good for halibut. With searing, we want to create a nice crust on the outside, but keep the inside raw. Now with the halibut, we're going to do a partial sear, but with the tuna first, hot pan, oil, let that oil get hot. Don't be afraid of the oil. I always say, you know, when the oil starts to smoke, the pan is ready. In this case with tuna, we're going to let it smoke just a little bit more. We have guests in the back door right now, so we'll let that go. And in the meantime, I'm going to actually start heating up my pan for the halibut. Check our tuna. You see, it's starting to come together. Now, how long is the tuna going to take? So many different variables. Really, we'll know by texture. It could take 15 minutes, depending on the oil to fish ratio, depending on the thickness of the fish, depending on and it could take 30 or 40 minutes. Just watch it, keep an eye on it. It is worth the wait, absolutely. So our pan's getting hot. The oil is almost there. We want to go in and out of the pan with this very quickly, because we want that rare inside. And while we're waiting, take a moment and just feel that tuna. Remember what that feels like. So that is what absolute rare feels like. Same thing with the halibut. Feel it. That is what absolute rare looks like or feels like. as this fish cooks, the protein strands are going to tighten up and they're going to squeeze out water. That's just what happens when you apply heat to protein. If we squeeze out too much water, you get dry fish. And as those protein strands develop, you're going to be able to feel the protein strands. And you'll know what I mean, and I actually might be able to show you with the tuna. So our pan is just smoking, it's super hot. Drop your fish in, and depending on whether you like it rare, mid-rare, I'm gonna flip it because I like mine on the rare side. It doesn't take long. If you have a thicker piece of tuna, you can sear it a little bit longer if you like that crust on the outside. Otherwise, a couple of minutes, or actually 30 seconds each side maybe. We're going to take it out of the pan, and that is rare tuna. It's super rare tuna. You can actually almost see the rare meat underneath. But what I really want you to focus on here is let's look at the protein strands. They're starting to break apart. Remember what that feels like. The more they break apart, the more the fish is cooked. So if we can get it to do that halfway through, to feel like that halfway through, that's going to be mid-rare. So I've heated up another pan. We're going to move on to our halibut. One other quick note. Roasting racks. I absolutely love them. Fish comes out of, not only can you cook on them, provides conduction around, but with the tuna, if I were to take that out of the pan, put it directly on a cutting board, there's going to be residual heat underneath, and that tuna is going to continue to cooking. With this, I can really slow down, almost stop it from cooking any further, and it gets to exactly where I want. So, halibut, how I like to cook halibut. A lot of times you go out and you order a piece of halibut, and it's got this nice, beautiful golden crust over the top. Then you take a bite, and you realize that beautiful golden crust, it's a little chewy, it's a little dry, it looks great on the plate. I'm not a huge fan of the golden crust, most chefs are. I think it kind of ruins the fish. I think it kind of overcooks the fish. I think it's done purely for presentation, not for flavor, because if you taste it, there's not a lot of flavor distance between that golden crust and the inside of the fish. So with halibut, what we want to do is we're going to give it a light sear. We might get a little bit of golden on there. It's fine on both sides. And what I like to do, a lot of chefs, hold on, let's talk about what most chefs do. We'll sear the fish, we'll put it on its presentation side, as we like to call it. We'll put that pan in the oven, we'll finish it in the oven. What that does is it gives you a nice crust over there. The way I like to cook halibut, we're going to sear it in a pan, we're going to put it on a roasting rack, then we're going to put it in the oven. Maybe we put a little bit of olive oil on it before it goes in, maybe we put some thyme sprigs, maybe we put a little butter on top, and we let it finish that way in a low oven with a convection. So our pan is getting hot, the oil is starting to wrinkle, as I like to say, and that gives us a chance to check our tuna. And you see, it's starting to cook all the way around. So the outside is cooked. That means our temp is good, but if you notice, the inside is a little rare. And here's a good chance. Feel it. Put your finger on it. It's going to start to fracture underneath the pressure, and that tells you where it's at. That's still pretty rare in the middle. So halibut. Doesn't have a lot of fat in it. You got to make sure you have a clean pan, and B, a hot pan. What oil am I using? Should have covered that earlier. You can use extra virgin olive oil, but really it's a waste of extra virgin olive oil, because once it reaches a certain, what we call smoke point, it loses a lot of its flavor, and you might as well be using a pure olive oil, or I like non-GMO canola oil or grapeseed oil. Just really neutral, high smoke point oils. Somebody told me avocado oil has a really high smoke point. You could use that. So we've charged our pan up, got it going over high heat. Clean pan, hot pan. Now, if you noticed, we seasoned this fish, and now we're starting to get some water on top. That water is gonna splatter in the pan. So before we go in the pan, there it is, a little bit of smoke. We're gonna dab that fish dry. And always when you put something in a pan, put it in the pan away from you. This is a good way to test if the pan's hot enough. If you can drag your fish over it, or your chicken, or whatever, that means the fish isn't gonna stick to the pan. So pan is still on high. We're gonna gently lay the fish down. We'll give it a little shake, and that's how we know our pan was hot enough. When that fish moves in the pan, it was great. And once again, medium heat is your friend. We're gonna turn our pan down and just let it cook for just a couple of seconds. Let it go for another 30 seconds or so. And then I'm gonna turn the heat up, and we're gonna do the exact same thing with the other side. Remember, feel your fish. Your fish will tell you what it wants. It'll tell you where it's at. A little bit of color. This is fine around the edges where it's going to be hot enough, but really nice, moist, beautiful. We're going to turn our heat back up, finish searing the other side. There's a lot of argument over where searing meat or searing fish locks in flavor. I think it definitely locks in moisture because you're creating a non-water permeable membrane on the outside to help trap that moisture in. Fish is still sliding around. We're going to take that fish out. We're going to put it on a roasting rack. That is a beautiful, beautiful piece of fish. We're going to feel it. That's what rare feels like. That's what very rare feels like. And it's starting to fracture on the top. We're going to take our roasting rack and we're going to pop this in the oven. It's probably going to take a while because I'm not going to put this on convection. But let's talk about temperatures. Mid-rare for fish, 125 to 130. Medium, 130 to 135, really fish dependent. If you want to use the thermometer, if you're more comfortable using a thermometer, go for it. Rather have you use the thermometer than overcook your fish. Turn that on. We're going to take a look at our tuna. Bring it over here, move this out of the way. So if you feel it, fractured all the way through. And then let's take a look at the inside. I'm gonna call this done. What I would do at this point is I would actually put this on a small rack and put it in my refrigerator to stop the cooking process, unless you're gonna serve it right away. You can chill it down, crumble it up, this is a beautiful salad niçoise. Make a vinaigrette with some of this, some tomatoes, some red wine vinegar. If you want to keep it for a week, it'll actually, if you chill it down in the oil, chill it down separately, and then combine it in the oil, it'll actually hold in your refrigerator for up to a week. It's called a tuna conserva. It's a very traditional Italian way. And so we're going to open this up. And if you see, really I should be using a knife. That is a beautiful, beautiful. It's cooked all the way through, but it's still moist. So our halibut is done. And let's look at our fish here. You can see it's even starting to fracture on its own. The protein groups are separating out, and really feel it. It feels different. And I'm gonna tell you, this is it's about mid-rare. And if I squeeze it a little bit, you can see those protein strands fracture. This is about 120 degrees, 122 degrees. What I would do is I'd take it out and I would let it sit and I'd let those protein strands relax, just like you would with a good piece of meat after it comes off the grill. Let it sit for a couple minutes before you serve it. And then let's take a look at the inside. Hold my pan. So if I open it up, I mean, it's just cooked evenly through, and that's kind of what you want with a little bit of rareness in the middle. And we didn't really talk about the oven temp. When I cook in an oven, generally proteins, I like to go low and slow, and I don't mean barbecue low and slow, 200 degrees for 16 hours. I mean more around 300 degrees, because what that does is you get slower penetration of the heat, and you get more even cooking. There's a few exceptions. Chicken, I'll go higher just because that high heat gives you a better skin. But fish, beef, lamb, pork, really 300 degrees when you're finishing in the oven is great. So episode 1 of All Things Fish is done with. As far as wines, the tuna, Big Bold Red. I mean, it's just, that's what you drink when you're eating tuna. I have seen some people do some more minerally whites with tuna, but I say go Big Bold Red. Halibut, it's a beer fish. Really, a nice IPA. Lagunitas, Sierra Nevada. I think that's what pairs best with halibut. So, once again, do you have any questions? MICHELA@MLFCircusClub.com. We'll see you next week with episode 2 of All Things Fish.